Now before we get into today's video, I just want to say a big thanks to Diamond Bright for continuing to sponsor and support this channel. Without their support, I'm not sure this car would have been repaired. Speaking of which, when this car gets home, and this is the subject of today's video, it's going to be hit hard with a lot of their stuff. Lift off, max foam, clay bar, I might even ceramic coat it, who knows. But this car has spent 5 months in various workshops with lots of welding and cutting and grinding, and it really does need a good clean now. And what better thing to do it than a bit of Diamond Bright. Now, on with the video. Good morning or evening or whatever other time of day it is, wherever you're watching this right now. You join me in what I'm sure you recognise as the Mini, my 2001 Mini Cooper. I used to call it pre-production. People have picked me up on this and I now call it early production because it's kind of a pilot build car. Still 202nd Mini ever built, so it's kind of a special vehicle. I like it a lot, lots of fun. Why am I driving it on a miserable day today when it hasn't seen the rain in about a year? Well, there's some good news today. I'm going to go and collect the Alfa 145, which a couple of months ago I actually thought might have been beyond repair because of the rust in the strut top, so I was thinking it's not going to be safe to fix it, but it's back in one piece and it's got an MOT. So where does the Mini come into this? Well, I was going to go and collect it with Mrs. Furious this morning, but unfortunately I didn't realise that she'd booked in our dog Indy, Indiana Bones, to have an operation at the vets. No more little Indies on the way, so she's not free. And then it occurred to me that the MOT on this car is due a couple of days after New Year, and that would mean I'd have to tax it during January when I would rather like it to be sawned in the garage. So it made sense to take this car up now to get an MOT on this one, so I can then sawn it after Christmas for, well, nasty cold months and not have to worry about getting it to the MOT station and taxing it later next year. So that's all done neatly in one place. However, on the way over I did notice a couple of things. First of all, it's not an MOT fail, but the front of the headlining is just starting to sag a tiny bit, so I need to get in with some headlining spray glue and refix that to tidy that up before that becomes a problem. The airbag light is of course on because the airbag light is always on a Mini. I think it's the wiring under the seat, it's really fragile and useless. And thirdly, it never really got warm. It's a cold day today. It was actually snowing last night in all over the country, actually, not just in the Highlands and places like that where weather pessimists will say, oh, it's going to snow tomorrow, and you look at the forecast, yeah, it's going to snow in the Outer Hebrides, not in southeast England. But there was snow in Kent last night, and this is the first time this car has seen bad weather in months. And I'd be surprised if this car has done 1,000 miles between this MOT and the last, thanks to COVID and everything. I think the longest journey I did was up to Gaydon to a mini meet in the gap between lockdowns, and beyond that it's barely been used. Anyway, yeah, so I've hadn't noticed that the heater doesn't work, and it is freezing today. And driving around the M25 this morning, it was like ice. My fingers and toes are numb, and looking at the temperature gauge, it never got above a quarter way up the gauge. If I'd realised that, I wouldn't have booked it in for an MOT, because it's going to need either a coolant flush or a thermostat maybe, or maybe a sensor perhaps has failed on it. So yeah, it may fail on emissions. If it fails on emissions, then the garage will have to go and fix whatever's wrong with it in order to get the proper temperature running on it. So I'm hoping it'll just nip through emissions and be fine, but chances are it's going to need something extra. When I was planning on doing like a coolant flush on it next year, so in the springtime, doing it when it's due for a service, do a big service on it, coolant flush, thermostat, all the fluids everywhere, gearbox fluid, the whole bit really. But yeah, that may have to happen off camera in the garage without me being there to see it. Well, as long as it works, that's the main thing. My main concern with this car all this year has been the lack of air conditioning, because any time I got to use it was in the summertime when it was boiling hot and the aircon didn't work. I had it regassed and it worked briefly, then it stopped working and made a horrible clanky noise, if you remember. So yeah, but I haven't used it enough to warrant spending the money. I haven't even used it enough to warrant spending the money on getting a remote central locking key, which is annoying. Apparently I can get an immobiliser key for this car made up for about 50 quid, which is no bother at all. But I don't want another one of them. It'd be handy to have, but what I really want is a remote central locking one, so I don't wear out the door lock, because they're notoriously fragile on these. but that's a couple of £100. Anyway, right, I'm nearly in the garage, so you'll join me again in something Italian and exciting. Well, look what's chugging away behind me right now. This one, we've gone on a trip of starting naming cars. We'll call Wabbit or Bugs or something like that. Tell me in the comments, what do you reckon? But it's alive. I really thought this car was probably going to be an utter goner. The amount of rust in those tops of the struts was... Why are you doing that? Was not good at all. However, I'll show you this in a second. It looks amazing under the bonnet right now. I was looking at the paperwork. It didn't have an MOT since November 2019, so it's a year. It came off the road because there was rust in the sills, which I then had to go at welding up during lockdown. And then when Trevor looked at it for its MOT after lockdown, he also said that the struts were terrible, which we have looked at now, and that's now addressed. I'll pop the bonnet and show you all of that. But it's nice to be sat in this car again and to hear this lovely T-Spark. Makes a fantastic noise. One thing that did kind of concern me on the drive back, there was a lot more to just a basic MOT than we were expecting. I'll talk you through us in a moment. The last thing though, before I came to collect the car though, the instruments stopped working. The lights came on, but nothing was happening. But then when they dropped the fuse box to go and look at the fuses, suddenly it all came back up again. On the drive round here, I'm about halfway home at the moment. I kind of stopped off the motorway. On the motorway, it was never getting above about a quarter of the way around on the temperature gauge, like the Mini really, curiously enough. But now I've pulled over and it's idling, it seems to be happy at the middle of the gauge where it should be. So I don't know if that's because it's a ridiculously cold day today. Here's my breath. It's freezing, it's really cold. Or there's a sensor or something gone somewhere, but I need to investigate that one further because it was like ice inside this car. Oh look, working fans, we fixed that before summer, during lockdown. Yeah, this now blows warm air, and it wasn't blowing warm air on the motorway, so there's clearly another issue to be looked at. Let's turn this off a second and pop the boot. This car has been in a workshop in various garages for the last, well, since May basically. This is a strut top from a Alfa 155. I bought two of these. One of them luckily wasn't needed, so that will find a home with someone else in the Alfa or Fiat Owners Club, because that's the same part as in a Fiat Tipo, Alfa 155, 145, 146, a whole bunch of, oh we had the Alfa GTV, the Fiat Coupe, a whole family of cars all use those and they all rot in the same place, so a solid one of those will save someone else's car. Right, let's close that down. Now take a look at this. I can't remember if I posted any of this on Instagram and Facebook and stuff, but look at these these strut tops. That is like new. That is a beautiful bit of work. That is nice and solid and complete in the right shade of Fantasia Azzurro blue. This one wasn't too bad. It had rotted through along the top, but the last person who had a stab at it had put a thick plate underneath and welded a thick plate to the bottom of the visible, cosmetic strut top. None of it's cosmetic, it's all structural. So it was looked at and decided that that was actually quite a solid repair, but very, very ugly. So it was all tidied up. It was welded from the top as well as from the bottom, and this is now a completely solid, double thickness effectively, strut top. This one though had just been plugged with filler. It was a shocking mess. It was dangerous, frankly. And so this is the one which got the new strut top welded in from the Alfa 155. So I'll drop in a couple of photos because it was done by a friend of mine who is an amazingly good welder but hates being on camera. So it's all, just a couple of photos from a phone. But it was proper open top surgery. Had its top cut off like a boiled egg. A nice straight cut across the top. Obviously the struts had to come out, the suspension's all out, all the airbox and all the stuff around here had to be moved out of the way. Actually quite a big job. And then the matching part was taken off the other strut, and then the two were put back together, welded in, filled over the top just to make it look nice, and then painted, undercoated, rust-proofed, and then painted in Fantasia Azzurro. So this is now, a beautiful, looks like factory. There's got the seam sealer as you would find from the factory applied in the same manner as it was from the factory as well. So it all looks amazingly good. Something I've just noticed is that there is some surface rust further down these, so I think I'll take the airbox back out and do a bit of wire brushing and painting to make this about the same on this side. There's just more work, lots more work, more things to do. And then of course there's my work, and bear in mind I'm not a brilliant welder. I'm an okay amateur welder for really basic stuff, not for heavy duty structural stuff. So while the cosmetic sills were off, a friend went back in there with his good welder and his good ability and kind of went over everything I'd done and welded the bits of metal that I put in a bit better, kind of went over my welds and just improved them, and the whole car has now been kind of pretty much wax oiled stem to stern. So we now have solid, structurally sound Alfa, which has passed its MOT, but that was not without its own little issues. Whilst the front thing was up in the air being jacked up and worked on, after it was all welded, my friend Trevor took it for the MOT. One thing they found though was there was a split CV boot, which is no biggie, so they replaced that, so little bill for that one. But then one of the brake lines actually burst. A brake line under this wheel arch, a hard line, split, so they had to make a junction, because it goes through behind the engine, so they had to make a junction down to the flexi, so there's a new bit of brake line there. And when they went to go and pump the system, check it was all good, this one, the hard line down to this wheel burst as well. Unfortunately it was one that was behind the fuel tank, so it was a slightly larger job to replace that length of hard line. So yeah, that was fun. But then it went for an MOT, and with just a couple of new wiper blades it actually went through. Phew. So now let's go and take it for a bit of a drive, enjoy the last few miles home. Oh, everything's coming back to me about this car now. It's so long since I've actually driven it. Oh, horses. Oh, everything's coming back to me now about what this car was like to drive, how willing and urgent the engine is, how you have to be so careful with the speed of the thing because it's just too keen to fly off and just rev away. I'd forgotten that I did need to go and grease those windscreen wipers because they are a bit lumpy. I'd forgotten the radio was falling out and it doesn't work. What is it with me buying cars with radios that don't work? The fan does work now. That's a big step up from last time I drove it. That was really annoying, having no fan speeds or only maximum. Now I do need to go and look at the air conditioning because it is misting up like crazy. I think you get to a point in car development where the ventilation systems are designed to work with the air conditioning to demist the car rather than just rely on force of air and volume of air. So that does need to be looked at. I have got the new compressor on the desk in the garage. That can be done at some point. Needs a really good clean up. They gave it a bit of a wipe down in the garage, so thanks to the guys for doing that. So I can't imagine how filthy it would have been after months of cutting and grinding. Cars get really, really dirty when they're being welded. It's a horrible, dirty process. The engine is just, the T-Spark, if you've never driven a T-Spark engine, I would urge you to go and try and find one while there are still some on the road. I did check the oil before I set off because, you know, as no one's checked the dipstick, well, since I guess May was the last time I saw this car. I doubt anyone's bothered to do that when the car's in for welding. So I checked a decent level of oil in there before I started. Oil actually looked really clean still, surprisingly. Because it must be over a year since it was serviced. I need to go and check the dates actually. I need to go and get one of those big kind of, I don't know, like a whiteboard or a blackboard or something in the garage, so I could write everything down and keep a tab on when all the MOTs and servicings and things are due. Something I had also forgotten with this car is the clutch. The clutch works fine, and in fact, yeah, no, I think it needs a new clutch. Let's just forget all of that. Let's forget what I was going to say. I think it's fine. The biting point is right at the top of the travel. I mean, you've virtually got your foot off the pedal by the time it's engaging properly. It does feel like it can slip if you're not careful. So I think I do need to get a new clutch plate in it. and I don't know when the timing belt was last done, because I've had the car, what, 2 years now? I think it must be 2 years or 3 years. No, 2 years, because I bought this car just as I started the YouTube channel, and it had masses of work done to it not long previously, including a complete engine rebuild. So I think the timing belt's probably okay, but I fancy doing one just for peace of mind. There was a £7,000 engine rebuild on this car. This car has had so much money sunk into it. It's worth, what, 2 or 3 grand. Last owner put 7 grand in the engine. The guy I bought it from spent a load on the bodywork, which I've now redone. Yeah, and the money just keeps on never ending. If this wasn't such a rare car, it would never have been looked after so much as this. Interestingly, I've just noticed the temperature gauge has dropped down to a quarter again now that the car's actually on the road. So there is a thermostat or a sensor or something is definitely broken. I'll have to look into that before I drive it too much further. Yeah, so when I first got this car, it was just as this YouTube channel had only just started, so about 4 people watched the video of me collecting it in the snow from Bedfordshire, driving it back in a, not exactly a blizzard, but certainly it was very, very snowy when I collected it, getting wetter and colder, kind of like this when I finally got home. And the first thing I did was drive it round to my friend who's got a garage. He's an Italian car specialist who trained a main dealer on this era of Alfa Romeo. And he said, it's coming back to me now, that yeah, whoever did the welding didn't do a very tidy job. It looks like they left the old metal sticking out underneath the new metal or something. I'll have to try and find a clip of that. If I've still got that on a hard drive somewhere, I'll insert that bit of footage of him saying that was bad welding, which should have been a warning sign all that time ago. Maybe I'll go and ask him. His company is called Go Italia. He doesn't do bodywork or welding or anything like that, but he does do mechanical work, and he's quite happy to have a camera pointed over his shoulder. So, thinking about it, I think I was talking to him about checking the cam belt or price on a cam belt when this failed the MOT on rust, and it's been sat ever since. I'd also been thinking about the suspension and ride and everything else in this car. The brakes on these were never incredible. A lot of 90s hatches and hot hatches and things didn't have great brakes. So I was thinking maybe a set of EBCs would improve the situation. There's some green stuff, pads and discs on it would help the car along. The tyres are pretty decent on there, but I don't know how old they are, but they seem to be gripping okay at the moment. But the suspension, it rides really well. It's not something you want to upset too much. The ride height could be half an inch lower, like 2 centimetres less, would certainly make the car just sit just a little bit more aggressively. Now I did, when I first set off and the temperature wasn't rising very high, pull over. Actually, I did treat it to a few gallons of V-Power as well, because it hadn't been refueled in months. So when I was at the petrol station, I did go and double check that there was a decent level of coolant in there as well. And it was warm to the touch. Now this car is coming home. It can now sit in the garage where the Mini normally lives for a week or two until the Mini's gone through its MOT. Then I'm going to have to go and get a lift over to go and get that collected back from its MOT, unless I go and drop the coupe off, because the coupe is also due an MOT in January. Then I can avoid having to tax the coupe in January as well. But then I've got 3 MOTs in December to deal with next year, which is going to be a bit of a pain. Oh dear me. But in the meantime, while I've still got these cars shuffling around using the shared garage space, I've still got room for Quint in the convertible on the driveway, which I still haven't got around to sorting out because it keeps chucking with rain, which is not good. You can't deal with a roofless convertible in the rain. So it does give me another window of another week or so to try and get Quentin sorted out. Hoovy in a recent video about, I think one of his AMG Mercedes perhaps, called himself a slave to his cars. And do you know what? He is absolutely right. When you get to kind of multiple cars, you're dealing with shuffling back and forth and trying to keep on top of all them various maintenance niggles, it does kind of take over your life. Like, this is Friday at the moment, and I've got a whole load of work I need to be doing. But no, I'm running across the county, collecting and delivering cars from one place to another. I mean, that started off in the Mercedes first thing today, so I could go and get the Mini from its lockup. So this is the third car I've driven this morning. And it's fair to say I would still have too many cars even if I didn't have a YouTube channel. I probably wouldn't have as many because I wouldn't have the same kind of impetus to go and do things with them. So you guys are a bunch of enablers. So basically, this is all your fault. If it wasn't for you lot encouraging me, I'd have a sensible life. Oh, something I forgot to show you when the car was stopped. We've even got a little can of Azzurro Fantasia Blue left over from doing the touch-ups on the, where he'd finished painting the strut tops. There was some left over to go and sort out where the cover sills screw into the metal sills to make them pretty underneath the plastic. So I can now go over the many and varied stone chips all across the front of the bonnet and make that look delightful. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode and the recovery and rejuvenation of the Alfa. It's been a long time coming, but I'm very glad to have it back on the fleet. This was one of my dream cars from back when they came out in the 90s. I wanted one forever. Finally got a 146, because even then 145s were hard to find 20 years ago. That got smacked in the back by a 38-ton truck. He did his best to turn the 146 into a 145 for me. So that was the end of my 145 experience back then, but now I've finally got one, and after a lot more work. I thought I was buying a good car. Normally, as you know, I buy projects that are entertaining to do. I thought I was buying a good one when I bought this car. Now it is. Now I've finally got the good 145 I wanted, and I can actually enjoy it. Okay, it's the wrong time of year to be enjoying it. I probably have to wind up parking it up through January if it looks like it's going to snow, but hey, it's here, it's safe, it's done, it's wax oiled, it's ready to be enjoyed soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, bell notification, blah 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 blah. See you again next time. Take care, everybody.